Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. We have a great show for you today. We will be covering some potential issues brewing between Jalen Smith and A.J. Brown as the Eagles' passing game continues to struggle. We'll discuss the Seahawks and whether or not they're the clear favorites to win the NFC West. We'll be discussing the biggest NFC contenders besides the Eagles and the Lions. We'll discuss today's Champions League fixtures. And please stick around for the end of the show where I'll be giving you my reaction to today's NBA Cup quarterfinals. If you have a question during the show, we want to hear your input. Is a big part of what makes the show successful, and we thrive on your energies and insights. Whether it's a quick comment, a thoughtful question, or an opinion you just have to share, please don't hesitate to drop it in the chat. And if you want to make absolutely sure your message stands out and gets featured on the show, there's an easy way to do that. Just use the super chat button at the bottom of the chat box to send in your super chat. This guarantees that super chat gets read on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel. We really rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we appreciate every bit of it. So go ahead, let us know what you're thinking, hit that super chat button, and let's keep the show as interactive and exciting as possible. And if you prefer, you can always go to the GSMC Podcast Network to tip, donate, or leave a comment or question there. We couldn't do what we do without your amazing support, and we're so thankful to have you as part of our community. We have to start off though with some issues brewing between A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts. It's a little rough, the relationship between those two right now, and just in general, A.J. Brown is a little a little bit of a crossroads right now. The Eagles, despite them, they're playing really good football. They're getting back to their winning ways after a bad end to last season. They reeled off, this run of wins, and they're competing for the number one seed, sitting in a good position right now. I believe they're 11-2. And they've reeled off 9 straight wins after starting the season off 2-2 since that bad loss that they suffered to the Buccaneers. They've been on a roll. They've actually had they reeled off 9 straight wins in this run so far, and they've been efficient. But lately, the passing game has struggled. They have won games, but against the Rams, Jalen Hurts only threw 179 yards. Against the Ravens, he only threw for 118 yards. And then this past week, he only threw for 108 yards, Jalen Hurts has. And despite, I wouldn't say he's playing bad football or anything, close to that, not really dominating the game offensive-wise. The last time he was over 250 yards this season, the last time he was over 250 yards this season, you have to go all the way back to October 13 versus the Browns. That is 8 weeks ago, I believe. 8 weeks ago or something of that sort. And the only time this season he's been over 300 yards was that one game at the Saints, where the offense only managed in that game. That was a defensive battle. I believe that game finished 15-12, and that was Jalen Hurts' best offensive showing in terms of passing yards. They're not dominating the game in terms of passing the football. Now, they're very efficient in the run game. Saquon Barkley is having an MVP caliber season. You look at the statistics, he's already rushed for over 1,600 yards. It's just incredible, the numbers he's putting up in the production that he's had this season. He's averaging 6.1 yards a carry, which is an unbelievable number. He also has 11 touchdowns. But that should not limit, what you're able to do offensively. You look at how strong Lamar Jackson has been passing the football compared to the fact that Derrick Henry has had 1,400 yards this season. Still, it's impressive what he's been able to do. Lamar Jackson, we're not getting that from the Eagles passing game. And then it led to some, interesting comments after the game. Um, A.J. Brown, when they were asking him what's the problem with the offense, he says passing. Then there was also a very, very interesting tidbit that came out this morning from Brandon Graham. He was one of he was on one of the local Philly radio stations, and I believe it was actually this might have been yesterday, but he had some interesting comments referencing the Jalen Hurts A.J. Brown relationship. Brandon Graham, who is one of the team captains of Philadelphia, and he was out injured. Actually, he's out injured this season. He was on a radio show, and he said, "I don't know the whole story, but I know that 1 is trying. 11 could be a little better with how he responds to things. They were friends, but things have changed, and I understand that because life happens. But on the business side, we've got to make sure we don't let the personal get in the way of the business, and that's what we need to do better." And he basically insinuated there that the personal relationship between the two has deteriorated from where, it might have been at the start of A.J. Brown's reign at Philadelphia, which there's no real surprises there. I mean, quarterback-wide receiver relationships, it's pretty common that they end up deteriorating over time. Speaking of another big one, we're just, looking at A.J. Brown and not A.J. Brown, Terrell Owens and Donovan McNabb. This is also another Philadelphia tandem. Shows it can start off really, really well, but it can deteriorate. And I think we've seen that a little bit with Jalen Brown, with A.J. Green and Jalen Hurts, or A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts. And yeah, I can't believe what we're seeing. Look, I don't like A.J. Brown making it all about the passing game struggles after they win the game, and how he looks almost dejected after a game, after a win, after going up 11-2. But obviously, it's really, really disappointing when your passing game is struggling the way that you are. A.J. Brown's production has gone massively down. And this is not an A.J. Brown that's, lost a step or anything, but he only has 836 yards this season, but he's averaging 17.4 receptions, or he's averaging 17.4 yard per reception. This is an A.J. Brown that's consistently in the high, his last 2 seasons, he's had 1,400 yards. He's nowhere near on pace to get 1,400 yards this season. So obviously he's very, very frustrated with everything going on. And yeah, it's something him, Jalen Hurts, what's the last, and Kellen Moore, they need to come together. They need to figure out to be more, whether it is being more balanced in terms of the run pass proportions, maybe getting more opportunities to A.J. Brown early so he could get more touches. Because it's not also, by the way, it's not just A.J. Brown who's, not better, who's taking the downside of it. It's also Devontae Smith. This is Devontae Smith. He's only had 553 yards this season. This is also Devontae Smith that's had at least 1,000 yards in the last 2 seasons. He doesn't seem on pace to get anywhere near that as well this season. It's just been a lackluster year in terms of the Eagles' passing offense, and the way that they got the run game going makes the team a whole lot more dangerous. But in the playoffs, you're gonna need to be able to push the ball down the field. You're gonna need Jalen Hurts to have a big game. You're gonna need A.J. Brown to be on his best game. You're gonna need Devontae Smith when they're doubling A.J. Brown and they need to make a play on 4th down to save the season. So they got to get this passing game going. They need to build some sort of momentum. And the great thing about it, if you're a Philadelphia Eagle, if you're an Eagle, is that you have time. You're 11-2. You're not playing in must-win games down the stretch, week in, week out. Like, other teams that are competing for playoff spots or playoff positioning. Well, yes, you're still competing for the number one seed, but you have room for some experimentation, for some figuring out, how to get the passing game going. You have more room to take more risks in these upcoming regular season games because the passing game has to improve. The passing game has to absolutely improve for them to take the level where they want to be as legitimate Super Bowl contenders. They have to be much better throwing the football. Short break here coming up. When we come back, we will discuss whether the Seahawks are the clear favorites to win the NFC West.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Before the break, we discussed the potential issues brewing between Jalen Smith and A.J. Brown. We move on to discuss the Seahawks and whether they are the clear favorites to win the NFC West. The Seattle Seahawks are sitting top of the NFC West now in week 15. They're sitting top of the NFC West. Seahawks sitting top at 8-5. Rams sitting second, 7-6, with the Cardinals and Niners sitting third and fourth at 6-7. After the Seahawks got another division win, this time over Arizona yet again. They're now 2-0 over Arizona, 1-1 against Seattle, against the Niners, and then they're 0-1 so far in the division against the Rams. A big sweep over an Arizona team a few weeks ago were looking like they were the probable team to win the division, but suddenly they collapsed. 2 losses to the Seahawks, sandwiched a Vikings game sandwiched in between a loss to the Vikings, which the Arizona Cardinals played hard and they were up in it till the end, and they were up throughout the duration of the game. But a fourth quarter run from Minnesota gets them the victory, 1-point victory. And yeah, now Arizona on a 3-game skid, and suddenly they go from favorites to winning that division and then now extreme outside looking in, because the Seattle Seahawks now have the tiebreaker over them. There's a 2-game differential between the two. The Niners is a little bit different story in the fact that they won their game. They destroyed the Bears. They have a 2-game difference between the Seahawks, But the Niners, the Seahawks don't have a head-to-head tiebreaker. So that third tiebreaker will come in division record, which, the Niners, let's say they take care of the Rams and Cardinals, which, realistically, the Niners are going to have to win out to, get into the playoffs as a division winner. They're going to have to win out. I don't see Seattle dropping, enough games where, the 49ers could get in without winning out. That means, let's say if the Niners were to lose one game, that means the Seahawks would have to lose another 4 games. Because it's, depending on how the tiebreakers go, depending on what's the game that the 49ers lost. So, yeah, just looking at it realistically, the Niners got to win out, and it starts off against the Rams this weekend, or this Thursday. Big game. The Rams coming off a big win to get to 7-6. Rams probably will have the best shot other than the Seahawks to win the division. I think they're playing really, really good football. They have the win over the Seahawks as well, which does give them the tiebreaker, and then they can extend on that division tiebreaker depending on what happens against the Niners on Thursday. The Rams playing some good football. Concerning thing about the Rams, those inconsistencies have shown up this season. They've not been the most consistent ball club. And down the stretch, consistency is gonna get you through in these games. And what we saw, of them in that Seahawks game, they were pretty lucky to win that game. They ended up having a few red zone stops, that interception that completely changed the game. By Geno Smith in the red zone on the goal line situation, and then it having to take Matthew Stafford Herculean effort in overtime, winning touchdown, just to scrape past the Seahawks. I'm not highest on the Rams like other people are. I still think they're a really, really good team, and I think at their peak, the Los Angeles Rams is the best team in the NFC West and is a perennial contender in the NFC to potentially make it out of the NFC. But at their worst, they can lose to some bad teams and they can play some bad football. It's just confusing to me, They'll have a 1 week like this, and then the next week they'll get shut down by the Miami Dolphins, who are a decent team, yes, but just completely shut them down on their home field. We know what Miami is in those games that really matter, like those bigger games. We know Miami don't tend to show up, and what they did, I was really disappointed with the Rams in that Monday night game. The way that they lost to the Bears as well. The Rams, they're pretty inconsistent. But that Rams-Niners game, man, that is huge because, number one, it's a division win. Niners have a chance to, level that tiebreaker the Rams have against them for now. If they can get that victory, move them one game closer, and you have to win out if you're the Niners. And the good thing about, the Seahawks or the Rams or the Niners is you look at Seattle's next 2 games, there's a good probability they will lose both of the games. They're playing a Green Bay team that's flying high, that's 9-4, and then they're going away as well to the following week to Minnesota. They play at home yet again to Minnesota. Minnesota goes into Seattle the following week, and Minnesota, they are 11-2 this season. So those are 2 games that I expect Seahawks to lose, but anything can happen, and they're both going away to Seattle, and we know the atmosphere Seattle can have. And I think this is the best decent Seattle team in a pretty long time. I have to say, it's been a while, so I think the atmosphere, as we start heading closer and closer to the season, as the NFC West starts becoming more and more of a possibility, I think that, that Lumen Field, as they call it now, is going to get even more ruckus, and we're going to see, the atmosphere we saw of the Legion of Boom days with these Seattle Seahawks. I think we're getting there where the atmosphere is gonna kick back up, where the fans are starting to believe again. So obviously for the Vikings and Green Bay, I think they're gonna have a big atmosphere, and I think it's gonna be difficult for both teams. Might have to go silent count, but I'm just hoping that the experience and the winning pedigree of those two organizations shows up at Seattle, because they're going to need both. If you're the Niners fan, you're going to need both of those teams to win. If you're a Rams fan, you would probably be fine with any of those two teams knocking off Seattle. It's not a big deal if they don't win both games. But if you're the Niners, because I'm looking at the Seahawks schedule after that. Then they take on the Chicago Bears and then Los Angeles Rams, and and the Rams, you don't know, will they not be playing for something then? They might be eliminated, especially if they lose to the Niners this week. That might start becoming a possibility where the Rams might not even take that final game seriously, which I don't think you'll get there, because the Rams don't have a particularly hard schedule. They do play the Niners, but then they play the Jets and Arizona Cardinals, 2 manageable games. So, yeah, as far as the Rams, you have to take care of the 49ers, and you'll be in pole position, and you kind of have to wait for Seattle to drop a game here and there. But the good thing of the Rams is you control your own destiny, and the fact that you play them week 18. And if you win out, if the Rams win out and they win that week 18 game, the Rams will be the ones that get in, because the Rams will have the tiebreaker over the Seattle Seahawks, and they'll have at least the same record with the loss that the Rams will hand at Seahawks in that final game. So I definitely think the Rams have the highest possibility out of any other NFC West team to win other than Seattle, because they do in a way control their own destiny. Arizona can't say that, and San Francisco definitely cannot say that. But short break here coming up. When we come back, we will discuss the biggest NFC contenders besides the Eagles and Lions.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Before the break, we discussed the Seahawks and whether or not they're the clear favorites to win the NFC West. We move on to discuss the biggest NFC contenders besides the Eagles and the Lions. So who are the biggest NFC contenders besides the Eagles and the Lions? So statistically, you'd have to look at a team like the Minnesota Vikings that's sitting 11-2. Not a great deal far behind them is the Green Bay Packers at 9-4. the next highest team, will be will probably be will be the Commanders at 8-5. Then you got the Rams sitting at 7-6. Tampa Bay also sitting at 7-6. Packers sitting at 9-4. There's some interesting angles, and I think you can make a point for a lot of these teams. Commanders, don't think you can make that point at all. Commanders, they're not in the battle. I do think the Vikings, Packers, Rams, and Buccaneers all have a say in this, I have to say. As far as the Rams, we saw how tight they got in last year's playoffs against the Detroit Lions team that could have went to, that you argue should have really went to the Super Bowl with that big lead that they had at San Francisco. You look at Matthew Stafford, he's really a warrior, and he'll keep the Rams in games that they're not supposed to be, and they'll be able to survive and maintain, despite having a team maybe having a, less of a whole unit than what the Rams have. Stafford is able to keep them in games, and when you have that franchise quarterback, he always keep you in those games, and he's still he probably is still, honestly. You won't get the credit because, the Rams are not competing at that highest of level, but you could argue he's probably the best quarterback in the NFC, and I know Jalen Hurts been to Super Bowl and is younger. I know what Jared Goff has been able to do, but, Stafford he's a really, really good quarterback. He can make every throw on the field. So, yeah, that's a big one. Tampa Bay, look, this is one I'm going to get a little bit of backlash on, but Baker is a winner. This Buccaneers team is coming on stronger now, was getting some players back. And you saw earlier this season, they were, they're one of the few, they're the only team to beat Detroit this season, and they're one of two to beat Philadelphia this season. The top two teams in the NFC, there's only one team that's beaten them both, and that is Tampa Bay. So they've proven that they can beat these better teams. They proved they can go away and win at Detroit. That's a very hard thing to do. You saw last season, in that divisional round, they were one possession away from potentially taking Detroit into overtime or winning the game. I mean, that's just crazy to me. And their team was just pedigree. They still have a championship DNA of what Tom Brady instilled in them. And they're a balanced unit, a balanced offense, balanced defense. And, yeah, I really like Tampa Bay as a team that can, get an upset here and there in the playoffs, I have to say. You can make a point for Minnesota. Look, Minnesota is 11-2, but they're a little bit of a boring 11-2, similar to the team that finished 13-4 or 12-5, but we knew that they were frauds. I get those vibes from this Minnesota team. Again, yes, they're 11-2, but I feel like in the big stage, going up against the big opponents in overtime, and the playoffs, can Sam Darnold lead up? Can this Vikings surroundings elevate that allows that allows them to play at a high level in this high-stake environment. Brian Flores' defense, they're incredible. They're absolutely incredible. It's one of the best defensive units in the league. And can they continue to bend but don't break in the playoffs? Can the surrounding cast elevate Sam Darnold's play into being a quarterback that can lead a team in an NFC team into the Super Bowl? I don't know. I have it hard to believe with this Minnesota team. And then it leaves me with Green Bay. Look, Green Bay last season in the playoffs, they destroyed Cowboys in the wild card round, and we know that and then we know what they the fight that they put on the 49ers in that divisional round. This Packers team is led by a winning quarterback in Jordan Love. They have a winning head coach in Matt LaFleur, what he's been able to do from a play calling perspective. And they have an opportunistic defense, a solid defense as well. And they'll have the advantage of having a quarterback who's not afraid to make the plays necessary on the road, from what we saw of him against the Dallas Cowboys in his first ever playoff game and against the 49ers. Showed some real poise, showed some real character, strength of character, guts to do what he did in that game against the Dallas Cowboys, to make some of the throws, to throw with no fear, what he did on multiple platforms. He's really someone with high dosage of confidence, which can be a good and bad thing, because it can be a great thing because you see, the playoff game, and that's a prime example of why it can be a really, really, really good thing. Or it can be a bad thing. Up till a few weeks ago, he's throwing an interception in every game of the season. And sometimes, when you have that ultimate belief all the time, you can become a little bit of a gunslinger to a detriment, where you give the other team extra possessions. And he was doing that quite a bit this season. It seems like lately of a bit, he's been able to turn it around. And obviously, the turnaround always starts off in a random manner. But yeah, he's incredible. But overall, regarding NFC teams, regarding NFC teams, I think any of those 4 teams could knock out the Eagles. And I believe the Rams, if they're playing their best football, could definitely knock off the Lions. I think Green Bay, they showed they can compete with Detroit, at least in the first game. I believe I didn't think they competed at a good enough level. I think they were outboxed. They were knocked out. They were knocked out on Thanksgiving. They were able to get some offense going after that first quarter. So I think they could, I think they can cause Detroit issues as well. But it's difficult. I think I'm gonna slightly lean the Rams. I think they are the biggest NFC contenders besides the Eagles and Lions. Despite their inconsistency, they have Matt Stafford, they have Sean McVay. Not many experienced coaches that's won a Super Bowl in the NFC. Mike McCarthy, he's one. Sean McVay is another. And I believe those are the only 2 in the NFC. I could be wrong, though. I could be wrong. And we're not going to see Mike McCarthy in this playoffs. So I think they'll have that experience of having a top head coach that's won a Super Bowl, that's rebuilt this offense around Matthew Stafford. And then you have the reemergence of Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, that wide receiver tandem. And then you got to pick and choose because we know Sean McVay can dial up anything in any given moment that can leave defensive off guard. It's really a head game with it's really a head game at this league, at this level. And short break here coming up. When we come back, we will discuss today's Champions League fixtures.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
before the break, we discussed the NFC contenders besides the Eagles and the Lions. We move on to discuss today's Champions League fixtures. Interesting day in the Champions League. All across Europe, European football is back. We have some Champions League games coming up tomorrow real quick before we start off talking about today's games. Atletico Madrid take on Slovan Bratislava. Lille take on Sturm Graz. Benfica take on Bologna. Milan take on Crvena. Borussia Dortmund take on Barcelona. Juventus taking on City. Interesting game there with how Man City has looked recently. Feyenoord take on Sparta Praha. Stuttgart take on Young Boys. Arsenal take on Monaco as well. But today's fixtures consisted of some interesting ones. PSG, huge win for them against Salzburg. PSG, they've been really struggling in the Champions League, and they're in a little bit of a fight now to stay in position to play that extra knockout game in January. They're sitting deep in with 24th place with 8 points, or with 7 points. They're tied with Feyenoord, who's 25th. That's outside a qualification spot. It's essential for PSG to start racking up result into Champions League, and they got a big win against Salzburg. They take on Man City in match day 7 before they play Stuttgart in match day 8. It's going to be the fight in those last two games to stay up, especially with City in between. But who knows? City have been struggling of late. We get a closer look at them. City at going up against Juventus tomorrow. So interested for that one. So interested. I think that's going to be an interesting game. A good measuring stick for both teams, quite frankly. Looking forward to that. Villa get the winner over Leipzig. Villa had a disappointing loss in the Champions League, their first. In not the last round, but the round before. They also then afterwards drew with Aston Villa, with Juventus. So it was good to get back on the winning side of things in the Champions League, and they did it through a winning goal from Ross Barkley. Villa, what they've been able to do away against a really good European teams like Leipzig. Leipzig, they're struggling. They're listed as a Pot 1 team, and they've really struggled in the Champions League this season. RB Leipzig does. They're now sitting in 34th as a Pot 1 team. Absolutely incredible. They haven't won a single game. They haven't drawn a single game either. They're 0-6, and yeah, they're just not playing good enough. And then the way that they've been losing this game as well, it's a really good win for Aston Villa, and it's important for them as well because that moves them now up to third place as they battle to stay within the top 8, which is important for them so they don't have to play extra games in January. Leverkusen got the win over Inter Milan. I have to say Inter Milan have been struggling a bit this season. They're now third in Serie A. They're 3 points off Atalanta, obviously with the game in hand, but they've been dropping points here and there in Serie A. Already have 4 draws this campaign, and then in the Champions League, yes, you're going up against a Leverkusen, but I believe it's a Leverkusen that is a little bit weaker than the Leverkusen we saw last year. And the Bayern Leverkusen, I thought, dominated this game. 5 shots on target to none for Inter Milan. We know Inter Milan are kind of try to be a little bit more defensive and try to keep things in front of them and play in transition. But I thought Leverkusen was the only of the two teams that could really play football going forward. I mean, you had Taremi and Thuram start up top, but they looked a little bit toothless. And a lot of it has to do with the service and how narrow this Inter Milan team is, but the players, have to take responsibility for that one. Just didn't create enough production going forward, and when you're going up against good teams, you don't take advantage of, your chances to have, good possession on the ball, you'll be made to punish. That's exactly what they did in that victory. Bruges got a 2-1 win over Sporting. Bayern 5-1 win over Shakhtar Donetsk. Brest 1-0 win over PSV. Speaking of Brest, they're sitting 5th place. They're also in a really, really good position to get a top 8 position. What an achievement that would be. Especially if you look at what they're doing in League One. They've been pretty poor in League One. They're 11th in League One. And it always amazes me how certain teams, they could be terrible in the year in the domestic league, but they'll still show up in Europe and they'll still make a good outfit of themselves. Like, the classic one is Chelsea when they won the Champions League in the 11-12 season. I believe they finished like sixth, I believe, that season, and their manager was on the verge of getting sacked if it wasn't for that Champions League final, and they won the Champions League. They also won the Champions League again, and they were 4th place Chelsea this recent Champions League they won under Thomas Tuchel. When Liverpool won it, I believe Liverpool were 5th or 6th as well. They weren't that strong of a team. It's always an interesting nugget for me when you see these teams that are really struggling at the domestic level show up in Europe and play at a different level, a different confidence. It's unbelievable to me, quite frankly. It's something I've never been able to quite understand, of course. But it's something I guess I've grown to admire and respect, how I guess the elevated pressure and the elevated intensity of playing in a European game, I guess, gets you playing in top football, top shape. But yeah. But going back, last game I have to talk about Real Madrid. Zagreb, Celtic 0-0. Liverpool, they're continuing their perfect season. I mean, it's just been obviously not unbeaten or anything, but they've been so perfect. They're first place in the Premier League. They're 4 clear of Liverpool, but they have a game in hand, so they can really make that 7 at the top this early in the season. In the Champions League, they're also at the top. They're the only team that's perfect. They have 5 points more than any other team in the Champions League so far. They're looking at a beyond perfect situation to clinch qualification there. As a top 8 team, it's pretty inevitable. And then this game around, they beat Girona 1-0. I thought it was a very open game, especially in the first half. We saw a lot of back and forth from Liverpool. I was really impressed with Bryan Hill, who was not afraid to take advantage of the space in midfield. It was very, very open, and we knew eventually, Liverpool were going to be the one that pulled the trigger. It came penalty for Salah in the 63rd minute, and I thought it was always going to be smooth sailing for there. The big storyline is Real Madrid winning this game against Atalanta. Man, Real Madrid were in a vulnerable position this game, I have to say. Even with this win, they're still not in a great place when you look at the standings. They're sitting, if you look at the Champions League standings, Real Madrid are sitting 18th place, which, yes, gets you through as a playoff, but in January. But all clubs, does Real Madrid want to be playing in an unnecessary, extra game just to get into the round of 16 of the Champions League? No, I don't. Especially with the amount of competitions that they have to compete in. You're talking about the Intercontinental Cup. They have that final that they're gonna have to play. Apparently, I think that games can be played in Doha. But Real Madrid, they don't want to be playing extra games. And it was a big win for them. Kylian Mbappe, he had a really, really good game. He scored that early goal, and I guess it was able to ooze some of the pressure that's been off later. I thought he exuberant more confidence as the game went on. I thought Atlanta played a pretty good game, and they were very unfortunate not to get that equalizer later on. Or Mario Retegi, point blank range, couldn't, get the power correct on the tap in. It ends up going over the bar, and it's little fractions like that. Because look, I thought Atlanta did a good job responding not only to Mbappe's goal in that first half, but later on the second half with Vinicius and Jude Bellingham. I think Real Madrid played a complete game, and they haven't played much like that in a while. I thought defensively they were open here and there, but that's always gonna happen, But what Mbappe did was absolutely special, with that goal, and also relieves the pressure as well. I hope this is, or I don't hope, but if you're a Real Madrid fan, you hope, I guess, this is more of what's yet to come from Kylian Mbappe at his Real Madrid, because he has been really, really, really struggling. Short break here coming up. When we come back, we will discuss some of today's NBA Cup quarterfinals.